The issue here is that the Houthis have already warned the Saudis. So it is not still very clear that to what extent Houthis would go ahead with their warning. But there is caution all around, and people are now scared of using al-Mandab for sending out the vehicles from the vessels from there. And mind it, these are very huge vehicles. They are known as VLCCs, very large crude containers, and they are very heavy. So in case these vessels could not pass through Bab al-Mandab, and there is a possibility to what extent Houthis will go and really this warning would materialize. No one knows at this stage. The shipping companies are basically taking a precautionary route. Some of the containers are returning back. These two vessels have returned back. So it's still wait and see, but there is a scare in the market, and much would depend upon that. In case the Saudis continue to use this route, what would be the real reaction of the Houthis? Would they go and attack these vessels, or it's just a warning and they may not go to the full extent? There are question marks, but because from the Houthi side as well, that in case they literally go after go as per their warning, then the war theater is going to expand much bigger. The US reaction, the reaction of the Saudi shipment from of the shipping companies, the reaction of the Saudi armed forces, and instinctively the reaction of the Pakistani forces who are now based in Saudi Arabia. All these things would come into the picture. So that means that the Saudis and much would depend on these things, and Houthis perhaps may not be very sure at this moment that to what extent they should go ahead for this warning. But people are scared and people are taking precautionary measures, and that's the reason that these two vessels were called back and they had to turn around. Not really. That's perhaps the maximum that they could send through through their Yanbu port. The reason being, let's get into some mathematics at this stage. Before the war, or before Feb 28 this year, 2026, Saudis were exporting 70-80% of their oil through Strait of Hormuz. This oil pipeline, I think they were using it for shipment of, let's say, 1 million barrels a day. Now, to a very great extent of this was even for the domestic consumption of Saudi refineries based in Yanbu and in the western coast of Saudi Arabia. So that means that very less of it was going for loading on vessels from Yanbu port and going through Bab al-Mandab. Now, post Feb 28, when the Strait of Hormuz was closed and fighting erupted out there, Saudis began using Yanbu port and Bab al-Mandab for shipping through to their markets, especially in Asia. Now, the maximum that this pipeline could have shipped is roughly 7 million barrels a day. And almost a month after the beginning of the war, Saudi Aramco chief announced that they are shipping 7 million barrels a day from this pipeline, the east-west pipeline of Saudi Arabia, carrying vessels from their the oil wells and oil fields on the east coast of Saudi Arabia to the west coast of Saudi Arabia. So it went up to 7 million barrels a day. Now, out of that 7 million barrels a day, some 2 million barrels a day were for the domestic Saudi consumption, and the rest 5 were for export. And these were loaded onto vessels from Yanbu port, and then they were going in. But at this moment, they cannot expand it any further because it has reached its maximum 7 million barrels a day. So the export is just 5 million barrels a day. They cannot use this pipeline for any further exports at this moment. And this 5 million barrels a day is less than what they were exporting before Feb 28. So not 100% oil is going through this, or not 100% of Saudi exports are going through at this moment. They have been trying to use Strait of Hormuz. When the hostilities stopped after the MOU, they started to load from Ras Tanura on the east coast port and started using Strait of Hormuz. Now that it has stopped, they are not in a position to export 100% of their capacity at this moment, or 100% of what is the requirement of the market, especially in Asia, which was the real market for Saudis and perhaps the rest of the Gulf Arab producers. Prices have gone up, you see. When the war started, Strait of Hormuz was open. There were certain objectives of that war were announced. And one of them was to make sure, the first one was basically regime change in Iran. That did not happen. And Iran went on to basically block the Strait of Hormuz. Then the Americans got into it and they blocked the Iranian supplies as well. Now that means there was a shortage in the market. And due to that shortage were being filled by different quarters. The US tried to export some, Nigeria, Guyana, all these started to export. Greater Brazil, they started to export perhaps in a little larger volume than they were originally doing, but this was not exactly meeting all the requirements of the market. So what happened? Prices from 70 went up to 110 or something at the peak of the war. Then indications started to come on that both the parties are talking and there could be a settlement of this episode outside of the war zone, basically across the tables. Now, once that happened, the prices started to going down. Even at the peak of the war, after reaching 110, once the market realized that both the parties, Iran and the US, are not really very ready for a full-fledged war, prices went back a little and they were staying at around 80 barrels per day. And as soon as the MOU was signed, the prices went down to again back to 70. And there were expectations that if things get back to complete normal, it may go down even lower. Now that the hostilities have restarted, prices have went up again. And that is because the markets are realizing that there could be a tightness of the market for various reasons, including the depletion of the stocks. So, and if the markets get tightened, the prices would go up. So if this current scenario exists, that could mean that prices could go up even from $80 a barrel. So there is every possibility that if this war goes on, even within the US, before the war began on Feb 28, the average price was something around 3.8, 3.9 barrels a day. Today, and then it crossed 4. And now with the re-emergence of these hostilities, the average is again approaching $4.5 a barrel. So it is increasing all around. And if this continues, and both the parties know of it very well. Mr. Trump knows it, Iran knows it, that the prices would go up. Iran is not that concerned with the prices going up. Mr. Trump is concerned, especially because of the upcoming midterm elections in November. So all said and done, the current spike in prices is because of this war, this ongoing war. And if this continues, if this persists, the price would go up. Now, there's a spanner in this entire thing that I am talking to. The spanner is that there is a sort of demand destruction as well. Chinese were not really buying as they were buying before the onset of the war. They had lowered their purchases. So that helped the market keep at around $80 a barrel once the war was going on. Now, the global the reserves have gone down very, perhaps they are at the lowest level since 1983. And that means that the urge and the quest for oil is growing up. Now, if China also goes back to its buying spree as it was doing before February 28th, the prices would definitely creep up much more than where it stands today. It does. Because virtually all the importers, it's not just Pakistan, all the importers are facing the issue. Prices are going up all around. Even in Canada, where I live, Canada is the 4th largest producer of crude oil, remember it. But still, the prices at the petrol stations or gas stations, as we call it here, they are basically been controlled by the market forces. So because of the market scenario, prices have gone up here. So they are going up all around. And insurance is going up because shippers are reluctant to pass via the Strait of Hormuz. They are also reluctant to ship it now from al-Mandab. So that means they might have to take the another route through Suez Canal and the pipeline, the Sumed, and then through the coast of Africa. So that would all mean that the shipment prices, the insurance, and the shipment time would go up. And that would impact virtually all the importers, Pakistan included. And that also means that prices would go up. The problem with countries like Pakistan is that they don't have much strategic reserves. That is something that Pakistan should have done. But anyway, we did not do it, despite knowing the upheavals that oil markets often face. So with very little strategic reserves, we have to be prepared that in case the war goes on, and in case even if al-Mandab also gets to stand still, the impact could be much higher than what it is today. You see, everything is going up. Everything associated with the insurance cost goes up. The time goes up. If it was taking 30, 35 days, it would take 45, 50 days to reach the destination, the export markets. That means the vessels would be will be occupied with that shipment for much longer period than it is. They can make a turnaround at this moment in time. So all these things would impact. Now, initially, there were some indications that, and even IEA was saying, IEA organized release of from strategic petroleum reserves SPRs of most of the OECD countries. China has been perhaps using its strategic reserves. So that was, these were some of the steps taken to offset the price increment. Now that is under question mark. Now, to what extent it would go up? Again, many things will depend upon what would be the requirement of the market. As I said, there are indications of demand destruction. There could be, still not though, could be much more emphasis on alternative production and alternative energy sources, including sunlight, including wind, including electric vehicles. So all these things would impact. So to come out with the exact figure is virtually impossible at this stage. This markets will have to determine. But what one could say with certainty is that the prices would definitely go up, because all these demand destruction and alternative energies, they will take time to materialize, and in the meantime supplies would be tight, and that could mean higher oil prices all around the globe. And that could also mean that the global economy would be impacted. That could also mean that the economic growth would go down, and that could also mean that inflation and recession could not be written off. So we could be in for bad times unless this issue gets resolved as soon as possible. Yes? You see, to Asia, perhaps it won't be difficult because it's not going from the Arab world, especially the other thing. From this part of the world, basically two things go out: crude and petrochemicals. Now, that would definitely be impacted, yes. But what would really be happening is that this region, the Arab world, is dependent, even Iran would be dependent on many imports, especially food ingredients, rice, wheat, everything is imported in most of that part of the world, in the Arab world. Now, if both the Strait of Hormuz and Bab al-Mandab remains closed, that could mean that the shipment of these items to the Arab world would be an issue, and that could mean that there could be a food shortage in that part of the world. There are already question marks about availability of potable water. Kuwait has already asked its citizens to be aware of it, reduce their consumption of water. Similarly, there could also be question marks about the availability of food and those sort of things in that part of the world. So it's a two-way traffic. If the world would be short of petroleum and crude, that part of the world could be short of all the things that they have been importing. So this is a very difficult scenario that the world is in right now, and Mr. Trump started it. It is, you see, Pakistan, for instance, let's start with it. At a point in time, there was discounted crude oil available from Russia. Now, once Imran Khan's government was dissolved, the political will to import from Russia also went down, although it was available at discounted price, but perhaps because of the pressure from US and other parts. Although what is interesting that India was allowed to import from Russia at a discounted price, we were not, despite all our wonderful relationship with the US. But anyway, we were not. Now, I remember one or two shipments came from Russia to Pakistan. Initially, it was said that the Pakistani refineries would be able to refine the crude coming from Russia, because that was a different crude. But it did not go beyond those one or two shipments. Now, to some extent, people say there were technical issues as well. Whether it was technical or political, I cannot say it with certainty here, but there were technical issues as well, because the refineries were built for a certain sort of crude, which did not meet the specifications of the Russian oil. Now, really, India made a wonderful deal. It started to bring in huge volumes of Russian crude, and then it started to re-export the products to Europe. So Europe, in a sense, was receiving the Russian petrol or fuel products, but via India. And in this entire rerouting, India made millions and billions of dollars. They made, this was a wonderful deal for them. But there are problems all around with the technical issues. If they are built, for instance, in the American, they are built to refine basically the heavy crude coming from Venezuela and Canada. Now, suppose for some reason they stop buying from Venezuela and Canada, then for them to refine even their own crude that is coming out to them from shale production, that is basically light oil. And their refineries, most of their refineries, not all of course, most of the refineries are not able to refine the light crude output. So these technical issues are there. Refineries cannot be turned around in a day or two that they could start to switch from one crude to the other. So these would remain an issue until and unless the world gets back to normal. So the ultimate point would be that the world should get back to normal as soon as possible. Otherwise, we are in for big trouble from a technical point of view as well, besides the availability, besides the transportation, and besides all these issues involved with with the Strait of Hormuz and al-Mandab. At a point in time, Fateh Birol, my wonderful friend, the chief of the International Energy Agency, at a point in time said that the world, while this war was on, he said that the world is in for the largest crude shock or the oil shock, even bigger than the 1973 oil shock. Now that the war is open, it's open to everything. We are again in for a much greater oil shock. Now everything would contribute to it, of course, the technology, the shipment. Now if Bab al-Mandab and Hormuz stops, or shipping gets very thin from there, that would mean that not much available oil and crude would be available in the market. That would also mean that the world's dependence, the world is still dependent on this oil from this part of the world. It cannot be replaced anytime soon. Already, the strategic petroleum reserves are at a lowest point since 1983. So this is almost 30, 40 years that the strategic petroleum reserves of the OECD countries are at the lowest level. Elections in US, the midterm elections are approaching. So perhaps all these things are putting a pressure on Mr. Trump as well to make a deal. He is speaking big, he's speaking strong, but ultimately I have a feeling that he might be forced to strike a deal. And this is what the objectives of the Iranians are. But in case it does not happen, we are in for big trouble. The world is in. As I said, economy would come to a standstill to a very great extent, and the world would be in with much less growth and a depression that we have not seen for ages right now.